Well, ladies and gentlemen, episode 20. We got a rename. I was gonna make a theme. I was gonna make a little jingle for the beginning here. Um, but I don't know. I think it would be annoying to hear the same sound over and over again. Like me stammering when I talk, or when I stutter, or when I repeat myself in these episodes. So we already have, one annoying repetitive noise. We don't need another. But we got to rename. I like the Celestine of the Stars more than I like the name The Evan Button Show. I think The Evan Button Show, it's really self-absorbed. I mean, everything I make on this, everything I make in The Evan Button Show, or like my music, that's really self-absorbed. But I don't know. I want to dissociate it with me in nomenclature. I don't. It's not just about me, obviously. I talk about a lot of things on here. Of course, all these things are pertinent to me. I'm not going to talk about um I'm not going to talk about Buddhism, right? Because I'm not a Buddhist, right? There's nothing wrong with Buddhism, and I think Buddhism is cool. I think it has a lot of important messages in it, but yeah, I'm not a Buddhist, believe it or not. But all that being said, we're taking a trip down negativity lane for episode 20 here. Talk about people uh, conflating their egos, and finding ways to make themselves bigger. My stomach is making a lot of really weird noises right now. I don't think I'm hungry. I'm sick. I've been sick, right? This has probably been going on for like a month now. I'm having stomach problems, so I should go to the doctor. I really should, but I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, to get into the actual meat and potatoes of things done today. Um, we're gonna talk about some stuff I used to do, some stuff I'm glad I don't really do anymore. I'm guilty into leaning into. I'm guilty of leaning too much into presumption. You know, like when people ask me if I speak Portuguese, yeah, the answer is yes, from me a lot of the times. But do I really speak Portuguese? I haven't spoken it a lot with people. I can read and write it better than I can actually speak and understand it. So, yeah, I've talked about this on the channel before. So that's me leading into presumption that understanding the grammar and understanding how words are said, and understanding a lot of a language in the literary form. I translate that to understanding the language, and I mean that goes for German too. But I've talked about this before, where it doesn't necessarily equate things, and that's conflating my ego. So I'm guilty of doing that, and I don't know. I guess I'm also guilty of people asking me, like, if I play instruments, and I mean I do play drums. Like, I know how to play the drums, but I'm terrible at it. So I mean I don't really do that either. I It's just a matter of quality, I guess. Like, I could blow into a harmonica, but I don't really know how to play a harmonica. Anybody can play a harmonica. Anybody can play guitar, like the Radiohead song. But it's yeah, that's ego conflation for you. And it came to my attention that this thing called hold on. Actually, I might need to reiterate. So I guess I'm gonna talk about discrediting, and how people I don't know, how people move accordingly when people try to conflate their egos. When someone proclaims they have obscure music taste, it was brought to my attention this website called Obscurify, right? So I went through it, and it said I had 97% more obscure taste than listeners around that use Obscurify. Okay? Now, I don't know how this is measured exactly. I have an Altoid in my mouth now, by the way. Um, I don't exactly know how this is measured. I don't know how it's qualified, quantified, things like that. I don't know the qualifications for which they deem obscure music, right? So we're gonna look at the United States as 350 million people, right? So 3.5 million people would be 1% of the United States population, right? And even less of the Earth. So I mean, we're gonna look at the Anglophone world, right? So Nigeria, Nigeria, England, the Commonwealths of, you know, from Great Britain. Then India, a lot of India, not all of India, but a lot of India, speaks really good English. Um, and you can consider like the Netherlands or Scandinavia within the Anglophone countries because a lot of them do speak really good English. So we're looking at a couple billion people here, right? So I could I could I could ride that high horse of being like, oh my god, I like music that people don't like, right? Or people haven't heard of. It's obscure. But that's not true, right? Because it's like movies, right? I've actually never sat down and watched Saving Private Ryan in full, but I know a lot of people who haven't sat down and watched Attachment. So, it's like this pop culture jousting that people do, right? So 200,000 monthly listeners, right? Listening to Horse Jumper of Love, they have around 200,000 monthly listeners, right? Are they obscure? So yeah, the reason I would never say that Horse Jumper is like obscure is because they have that amount of people. I like That's a lot of people sitting in a room, right? Aftermath of Delonia, I'll put it in obscure. Tomorrow's Tessellations, I'll put it in obscure. The Blams, I'll put it in obscure, right? Um, I'm really not making a good case for myself because I could list more bands, but I'm completely drawing a blank. I've been listening to a lot of Aftermath of Delonia recently. Um, Asher, I wanted to reach out to him because he seems like a cool ass dude, but Quentin Mitchell's music, that's obscure, right? I'll take that. I'd never use that as a proponent, because it is sheer providence, right? One of those guys, I know his ex, right? Um, and he just happens to make great music. Tomorrow's Tessellations, guys reached out to me on Instagram or so many years ago, right? The Blams, I think a similar thing happened, or I saw an advertisement, and I just so happened to like the band, and so like it's pure providence, right? And it's not so much me look like Aftermath of Delonia. This is so self-absorbed, and of course there are people that go out there actively looking for more obscure music to listen to. Like every now and again I'll scour through. Fans also like sections of bands I like. So like Joan of Arc, right? Joan of Arc, they're really important to the emo scene, but like not very many people give a fuck about them. Or Rick Beato's band, Billionaire. They don't have a whole lot of monthly listeners, despite being Rick Beato's band, and they have great music, right? And so I think those are underappreciated, but not, you know, like, I talk to Johnny Gifford every now and again, the guy from Debt, and he's super cool, right? So I think Debt would be like a semi obscure band, but at the same time, like, it's sheer providence that I stumbled upon them. And yeah, there are people that actively go through trying to find new bands to listen to, and all power to them. With that being said, it's very hard to be a true obscurist in the nature of finding music. Now, would it be possible to say that obscurism could exist in the realm of music? Like, yeah, sure. I mean, I think it would be easier for things like jazz pieces. Like, I like Charlie Parker and everything, but I don't really know Charlie Parker songs off the top of my head, and I can say the same thing for like Chris Christopherson. Um, like I have come to Papa memorize, but that's because the lyrics like they make me laugh, right? So maybe not for the best of reasons. Um, or that's not Chris Christopherson. That's a Bob Seger song. I apologize. Um, but like yeah, I don't really have any. I really like the album Christopherson. It's like this kind of like anthology of songs he'd written in his early career, I think. But I really like that album, and you know, I do tend to remember things that make me laugh or they have titles that stick out. I guess I do remember a lot of nuance, like Duster's recording studio being known as Low Earth Orbit. But that doesn't really generally contribute to my knowledge of the band's music, right? Like, I mean, I like Capsule losing contact as a concept because it is an anthology of like most of Duster's early music, but Duster's not an obscure band anymore, right? Slowcore isn't an obscure genre, and I think it does like boil down to genre. Like Country Gaze would be more obscure than Pine Grove themselves because Pine Grove has garnered significant internet attention, but I mean, when that happened, simultaneously, Big Thief also got really popular, and Adrian Lenker got really popular, and their music, all of these bands I'm listing, they're phenomenal, right? So I mean, the typification, like grunge, grew as a genre, and while Nirvana did leave people in the dust, there no one would ever say the Smashing Pumpkins are an obscure band, even though Nirvana usurped their greatness or what would have been their further greatness. It is a miracle the Smashing Pumpkins have a Diamond album and they are as popular as they are. But I mean, like at the same time, you know, like they're still not an obscure band, and the same thing goes for Radiohead. They all fall into that mantra, and Britpop is the same way. I'm not really sure of any obscure genre. I mean, DIY emo, I guess, but I mean, that's so niche that it's so hard to qualify what is real and what isn't real. You know, like November and July, he makes fucking phenomenal music, but it doesn't follow the conventions of popular music by a lot of stretches. That doesn't impede upon its quality. It just is a differential, right? I show deference to tomorrow's Tessellations Angel because he's a great guy. He's cool. I like his music, and the Tony so far, he makes really great music, and I like to show a lot of deference to these guys because their music is important to me personally, but I think they have skill. I think they're really talented guys. Like, I'll rearrange myself for you by the Tony so far. It's one of a kind songs, and you don't have to write one of a kind songs. Like, I mean, you can write generic songs. Like everyone likes the Ramones. I think I Want to Be Sedated is the most easily replicatable song to ever exist in the realm of pop, but or not pop, punk, like that genre. But I mean, it's a typification. Punk became popular, and when genres become popular, they uplift others. So I mean, if emo rap would have stayed a SoundCloud thing, I mean, it would be an obscure genre. It's not obscure to like things like, you know, Lil Xan or Juice World or things like that. It's not obscure at all because the genre lifted those people up. Now, yeah, you have little microcosms of individuals trying to chase something, chase identity, and that's a lot of musicians do that by you know um placing labels not on themselves for genre, but um they make themselves stand out. Like the Smashing Pumpkins, they stand out with their art. you know they incorporate a lot of elements, but also in name, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, and I guess Nirvana is the same way, where they had a nude baby on their album cover. Like, that's really not typical, you know. Um, and I guess in name too, and I go back to Duster, low Earth orbit, really identifying themselves with space. That's really cool. And Hum did the same thing, for a while there. The You'd Prefer an Astronaut is very space, and all those sounds. And I mean, it is an identification, like it is a self-identification thing where it's I'd like your hair long. It has nothing to do with space and name, but the whole uniformity of Hum's sound through You'd Prefer an Astronaut is really I mean, it's really special. And I guess the name You'd Prefer an Astronaut is what ties it together. I mean, Stars is the first song on the album, I'm pretty sure, and I mean, that pretty much solidifies it. But even if the rest of the album has nothing to do with space, it's still space rock, and you don't know until you know. Like, you don't know. Like Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness is also a space rock album in a lot of ways, but Siamese Dream also has that, I guess Hummer, Rocket, yeah, Hummer, Rocket, Luna. They have those Space Boy. Jesus, that one was so obvious right in front of me. But even Soma has these like space rock feels. But if they distance themselves, but I don't know, like if they would have distanced themselves in name, like if they didn't choose the song title Luna, or like I don't know, I guess they'd have to change the lyrics in this case. But I think if they changed it from "You'd Prefer an Astronaut" to I don't know, you know, to something, like like a title track, like "Why I Like the Robins" or whatever. Maybe songs of farewell and departure wouldn't be a spacey song if it wasn't in that cohesiveness, right? And I mean, I guess that's concept, but the conflation of ego people have with trying to find things that fit their niche. If they find something that's not as well known, they'll ride those curtails. And I don't know. I'm not particularly a fan of that. I guess I used to do that. I used to boast about my music taste, but I have nothing to boast about now. There's someone that likes the stuff I like, even my music. I don't. I have no reason to be proud of my own music or my music taste or anything like that. It's just absurd, right? It's an absurd obsession with self and people trying to people trying to make weight of I don't know, things that aren't special to try to feel special, and there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, when it comes to human nature. You know, I didn't start a podcast because I thought I had any great ideas, right? There are people that start podcasts who think they have great ideas, and there are people who start a podcast. There are lots of reasons to start a podcast, right? You are riding the curtails of some famous event like Haley Welch, or you you have things you're passionate, you want to talk about. You think you have good ideas. You actually do have good ideas. There's clear distinction there. You think you're funny. I thought I was funny for a period of time until, if I sit here and try to tell you jokes, like, I've got nothing. I'm sure I do say funny things here and there, like, but that's natural through the course of dialogue. Everybody says random funny shit, all the time, right? Even if they're not known as funny people, my friends know me as a funny person. Well, I generally try to be that sometimes, not all the time, not in times of serious discourse or when we need to figure something out, or, there's something going on in the group, So, I mean, I know when to tone it down, but, like, yeah. So, it's just, there's lots of reasons to start a podcast. I did this so I could talk, It, I was known to talk to myself. I don't really talk to myself more, but this is my talking to myself time, right? I can talk about whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want, right? I brought Jacob in once. I don't know if I'd do that again. Not for any other reason other than he's a busy guy and I'm a busy guy, and I like this to be sacred, right? I control everything here. If I want to change the name of the podcast, I have the right to do that, right? If I want to talk about sports, I'll talk about sports. If I want to talk about video games, I'll talk about video games. If I want to talk about people, if I want to talk about language, if I want to talk about anything, I can. I can come on here and say something ridiculous like, I think Coheed and Cambria is a better emo band than My Chemical Romance, and no one can be here to object. The comment section exists. I can ignore that. I can delete that shit. Like, I actually believe that. I think Coheed and Cambria is a way better band than fucking My Chemical Romance. Like, their music is better. I mean, obviously they're more progressive, which, be that as it may, it doesn't inherently make quality, but it definitely makes them more skilled, even though Ray Toro is a great guitarist. I just think Coheed makes better music. I also think the Amory Wars is a better story than Danger Days. I like Danger Days though. I have the comics. I think that's really cool. And Gerard Way is really good at writing comic books, and he knows his shit. I think Claudio knows his shit too. I could be incorrect. I think I could be incorrect. He might not be as well versed, but Gerard Way knows his shit. Like he knows his comic book shit, and he's friends with Kevin Smith too. And Kevin Smith is a big comic book guy. I like comic books. My dad knows a lot about comic books. He knows a lot more than I do, and I owe a lot of my knowledge about comic books to my father. But I also read comic books. Not as regularly as I'd like, especially since I've distanced myself from fiction. But I do really like comic books. I like comic book characters. I like old comic books, not so much new ones. I did read The Umbrella Academy, though. I'm a big fan of The Umbrella Academy. I think it's really cool. The live action shit they did with it for Netflix is some of the castings. I think some of the people on the cast are pricks, theater kids. And, I'm a huge prick, too, so look at me being, self-aware, but also critical of equality. That's how people conflate their egos. It's okay when I do it, but not when other people do it. Not that it's okay when I do it, it's just, how it comes off, right? So, yeah, I think Coed and Cambria is better, but I can do all that shit here, and it belongs to me. If I have someone else here, I have to engage in discourse, and I don't get as much as I want to say out. That's why my episode with Jacob was relatively short, because it wasn't really a full episode. And, I don't know, if I have someone else with me here, I feel like an asshole making everything about me, and I really try not to do that when I'm engaged in conversation with people, even if it is my show. Because, naturally, as all conversations go, what the other person's input matters to me, and it's a lot more important to me than what I have to say, and I try not to make everything about me, but there is a level of personalization you're going to bring to every single conversation, so I guess just bearing that in mind, it's really tricky. It's really tricky to, coordinate a podcast with more people. I don't know how a lot of these people do it. I know Joe Rogan's really good at it, I know the guy's kind of crazy at points, but yeah, Joe Rogan's really good at talking to people and getting information out of people, and yeah, there's a lot of guys out there that are better at the whole podcast thing than I could ever be, but that way, if I make everything about me here, I do it less in conversation. Like, if I have something to really get off my chest and I can't get it off, like, there are things that happen in my personal life I don't talk about on here. Like, I have a brother, I have parents, I have more family than that. There are things that happen in my life I just won't talk about on here because, it can be for multiple reasons. It can be for a multitude of reasons. Like, it depresses me, especially a lot of the family shit. I get really touchy about that, but you really have to know the details to use that against me. But, intimately putting it out on a public forum is it's putting my emotions on, a stake, right? It's impaling them and just putting them on an effigy to hurt me, come back and hurt me. It's not because people want to do that, but I know there are people out there that don't like me, and that would use that against me. I'm sure this doesn't happen, right? But if someone were to dislike me to a grand extent, they could listen to all of these episodes and expunge and even just play the audio back at me, and like, it would affect me negatively because I know they're mocking me, right? And this is a medium where I go to say whatever, right? I'm not shameful of my thoughts, The earlier episodes have a lot of immature dialogue and me trying to be funny, and then some episodes contain more foul language than I want them to. I would like to keep cursing to a minimum. That way this is listenable and not some kid spouting out at the mouth, trying to get a sailor's mouth out. But what this is to me is it's like an organized way to get my thoughts out, And what I mean organized is I upload episodes. I don't plan these out. I don't have a script. I've thought about script writing, maybe doing video essays, but I stumble over words, even words that I've written. I would need to practice, and yeah. There are hurdles. There are hurdles indeed that I do have to jump through, even just one. Like, I can't say the wrong thing. I don't think I'd ever do. I would never, like, I would never spout a racial slur or anything like that randomly, because I don't do that in natural dialogue. You know, there are things that I try to avoid talking about, like politics, like, you know, um, I'm an admirer of good in parties, so if someone could execute making American life better, Democrat or Republican, I'd be very happy, right? But I mean, it's not a two-sided coin. Woodrow Wilson tried to achieve world peace, but he was also a raging racist. Really terrible person, Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst presidents of all time, and people listen to that and they'll go crazy. And I don't know. It's hard for me to be pro Woodrow Wilson because I'm pro Germany during that time period. Um, but at the same time, I can't really apply that logic because I'm a very stern believer that Franklin Roosevelt should have done something about the Holocaust early, like 1934 early. I think Neville Chamberlain. I think no appeasement was the best policy, and I understand, that it was trying to keep world peace, but Germany was not on a good. Germany was sick, like Germany was sick and diluted with patriotism and jingoism out the wazoo, right? No appeasement would have been better. I'm very anti I'm very anti Franklin Roosevelt because of Japanese internment and safety checks on Axis power families. People, families that came from Germany, Italy. People getting welfare checks, I guess, right? Welfare check, like checking in on how they're doing, as like a espionage sort of thing, not welfare checks as in Social Security. But speaking of Social Security, I'm a great admirer of Marxism and Lenin, or not Leninism. I'm a great admirer of Karl Marx, right? Great admirer of Marxism. I like a lot of socialist writers. I like H.G. Wells, right? War of the Worlds is great. I have a copy of War of the Worlds in my little bookcase section. He's a great socialist, right? George Orwell, great socialist. There are a lot of great socialists out there that write a lot of really great books. I don't think Ray Bradbury was a socialist, but I think he was left leaning. Like you read Fahrenheit 451, and you look at the fear of descending into fascism, right? But I'm also a great admirer of the Bible. I think the Bible's a wonderful book. Whether I believe in what's in it or not, whether I think it's grounded in some truth or not is completely irrelevant. I think it's a great book. Not just a great book, great piece of literature. I think the Bible is one of the only books that you need to read in your life, right? In the Western society, it's probably like the Bhagavad Gita. I think I pronounced that right. Bhagavad Gita. I have a copy here. It's got Sanskrit, and then it's got transliteration to English. It's very helpful for learning how to read Sanskrit. Or I think it's Devanagari script, I think it's called. But, you know, but, yeah, it's very helpful for learning that script. And then, yeah. So I like a lot of those. I like reformist books too. Like my favorite book of all time is Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. I don't know if he was a socialist. I don't think so, but he's a reformist, right? Wanted to reform. He wanted to reform in immigration. Wanted to reform in conditions and meatpacking plants, and I don't know. A lot of people who are really critical of literature, I feel it comes from a place of hurt pride because they want their own work to be held to a high standard. They want people naturally want hard work to go recognized, and that's totally normal, right? I wrote that upon cobbled streets, and I didn't get very much recognition for it. Very none at all, really. But I'm not a writer. I'm not someone who's depending on writing to keep me like you're rich, right? To keep me making money. I'm not J.K. Rowling where I have to write books to make money, right? That's okay. That's probably why I don't care as much. But like, yeah, I understand where a lot of that comes from, and it's like it's very embarrassing when I'm in like conversation, in a different language, and I make a mistake, and I try to patch it up with words. I make a grammatical error, or I don't know a word, and I try to patch it up with words. Um, it's very embarrassing to have those things happen, or to misinterpret something. Yeah, or to forget. Forgetting words is the worst. Like, nehmen and stellen. I used to forget nehmen, stellen. I used to get them mixed up, and it was really embarrassing because nehmen is to take and then stellen is to put, right? And yeah, just not knowing the word for things like so. Uh, yeah, so a lot of words aren't really important most of the time. So like the word for river in German is Fluss, right? How often do you use the word river, right? So Fluss, wo ist das Fluss? Meine Stadt ist am Fluss, right? Frankfurt am Main. So Frankfurt on the Main River, right, is what that means. But like, or Anvil, Ambos, right? You don't necessarily need to remember that. Do I know what the word for anvil in Spanish is? No. Do I know what the word for computer in Spanish is? No. I could probably get it's probably like computador. Um, my French professor has said the word for laptop in French probably 3 times, and I still don't remember it. Right? If you put hold on. So I have Larousse, French English English French dictionary. Right? I'm in the French section. Right? So I would assume like 50% of these words are cognates in English, and then the others I could piece together. Like, if I had to guess, the French word for library is probably bibliothèque. Not biblioteca, bibliothèque. Hold on, I'll look this up with my Larousse French English Dictionary, published in when? Um, Look, that's not the 1971. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I was right. Bibliothèque. It actually comes up as bibliographie, and then it substitutes the graphie with various endings. I really like this style. I have a Latin. I think I have a Spanish one. Hold on, let me not fuck everything up. So obviously I have a German one. I have a Latin one. I could have swore to God I had a Spanish one. I have a Russian learning book. It's very strange, but I mean it's useful, obviously, right? It's got key phrases, shit I wouldn't normally know. I have no fucking clue where this Spanish book is, and that's very upsetting. Yeah, I swore to God I had a Spanish dictionary somewhere. I have got to get one of those. Um, yeah, so ideally I'd like, what do I have up there? Latin, French, German. Alright, that's useful. Um, I also have a German phrase book, which is different than the dictionary because it has key phrases that people allegedly use, right? It's hard to make those sorts of books, so no hate towards that kind of idea, but yeah, I swear to God, I had a Spanish one, so I'm gonna need to pick one of those up. So I'm gonna pick up a Spanish one, an Italian one, a Portuguese one, and that's an English French English one, so that's very useful. But yeah, a French or an Italian dictionary would be very very useful. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, there comes a little embarrassment there where like I think I have something and I don't actually have it, and I just announce that I don't have it in front of everybody. And I have that Latin dictionary. I've read this Commentary de Bello Gallico, and I still don't really have perfect pronunciation. when it comes to speaking Latin, so that's kind of embarrassing. But yeah, when it comes to cognitive errors though, when you genuinely mean no harm, like I'm really not trying to do any harm here by being like, oh yeah, I speak Italian, and then having a sentence fall flat like io parlo italiano. Yeah, that's so impressive. I speak Italian. Yeah. When someone says something like, "Oh, speak this language," like, what am I supposed to say? Like, "Mein Name ist Evan. Ich bin Amerikaner. Ich liebe Deutschland. Ich liebe Deutschkultur. Ich will zu gehen Deutschland ein Tag. Da ist whatever, right? Things like that, and that is probably grammatically incorrect sentences, by the way. I don't know my cases for shit. But yeah, it's like yeah. So there comes a little bit of that humiliation and everything, but yeah, people conflating their egos, and when I was a kid, I used to be guilty. Sometimes something slips out, that yeah is a little askew from the truth, and um, hold on, let me think of something. So dialects, here we go. So I have a natural premonition to be like, oh, well, I know a good portion of this language, so I could probably understand this dialect. That's probably not always true. Like when Pennsylvania Dutch, like, no hate. Actually, that's a total lie. There is definitely some hate with this, but Pennsylvania Dutch, I have a very, very hard time understanding, and um, not a slight against Pennsylvania Dutch dialect German, Volksdeutsch. But I try to avoid actually speaking German with Pennsylvania Dutch people a lot because they're very hard to understand because it's Pennsylvania Dutch, and I already have a hard time understanding people who speak German, right? So, um, yeah. So when I'm like Alemannic, yeah, I'm sure I could understand that. Yeah, I'm not able to write in it, but I could probably perfectly understand it. That's probably not entirely true, right? Or, Niederdeutsch, very different, and there are regional differences in all the German, so Austrian German, and then uh, Bavarian German, and then Saxony German, Nordrhein-Westfalen, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, um, Schleswig-Holstein, things like that. All those little states, all the Bundesstaaten or Bundesländer, all those things. They all have their regional differences, and like my Hochdeutsch ist nicht sehr gut. I don't follow the rigid rule. Like I'm a huge hypocrite because I love grammar and I think grammar's great, but you heard me admit I don't really know my cases. I'm lazy in that. I should have learned my cases eons ago, but I've been so focused on building and remembering my vocabulary, remembering verbs, remembering conjugations that like cases have kind of fallen to the wayside. Like, do I know the difference between dative and accusative? Yeah, but like, do I remember all the endings for most of the words? No, not. And it's like gender. Like, das Stule. Yeah, sure. Der Stule. Yeah, sure. Die Stule. Yeah, sure. Um, you know, remembering if it's N or Z for end. So, uh, the mena, I think, is like men. So there's different ways for plurals that maybe I mess up sometimes. So, die Menen, or der Menen, or das Menen, or den Menen, dem Menen. All of those things I should have remembered by now, but I'm really lazy. But I do love grammar. I think grammar is really important. And, like, everyone's naturally bound to make mistakes, and even native speakers don't speak perfect. So, I mean, I could use that as an out, but I don't really want to do that. I do need to get better German grammar. I need a formal course. Like, I need a formal German course, but I really pride myself on my self-learning, but French, it just couldn't be done. Like, Like I got to a point where reading French was enough, and then reading and writing French was enough. And I never really was in a position where I needed to learn new things because I text, and autocorrect is such a big help with other languages on phones. Like I cannot recommend this enough. If you have a cell phone, quickly, if you're learning a different language, find a language exchange partner, which I've not done. But find someone who speaks a different language, and like, I just install the keyboard, and you'll learn as time goes by, right? And I mean, I've learned so many things from autocorrect itself, and you just have to make sure it's the right thing, of course. But like, yeah, I've learned so many things. It's so useful. I cannot, like, technology is so useful now. I would not be a linguist if I would not be a linguist were it not for that. But yeah, I inflate my own ego by sometimes I don't do this to really improve like my ego or anything, or like blow up my sense of self, but sometimes I use words wrong. Like I used to use tessellation, or I used to use tessellate, like tessellations in place of tribulations a lot because I had been listening to a lot of Tomorrow's Tessellations, and then I don't know, like I don't know, just I meant to use tribulations, and a lot of words don't get used right anyway. Like there's a semantic meaning versus a literal meaning, and there's nothing wrong with that. That exists in all societies. Like yeah, like Dika becoming Diga, it like du bist meine Diga, like you are my thicker, like that doesn't really make sense, but that's how society that's how people speak, like I thought I heard it about like Baden-Württemberg, where a lot of people were saying Diga, and like my homie, which as an English speaker, you're getting close. You're getting real fucking close, German. Like we have our own problems with lexicon here. Like we don't need words that sound like the colloquial N word that we have to memorize and use ourselves for German. It's very like that's one of those really unfortunate coincidences because you mishear that, you're in for a treat, right? But no, I digress, right? But yeah, so I use words wrong sometimes that I wish I wouldn't. I wish I wouldn't use any word wrong. If I could speak perfect English all the time, I'd love to. But I mean that comes off boring. I don't want to be boring. I don't want to be robotic when I speak. I do, but I don't. I have a really love-hate relationship. When I write something out, it's very robotic because, well, it's not robotic. It's very me. I don't really care for modern conventions. I write how I want. I think ye is better than you. I call me different, call me whatever. Like it's not even intentional, and I use British spelling, British vernacular, because I think it's a better, it's more intuitive, right? It's counterintuitive to phonics and phonetics, but it's more intuitive to the history of our language, and it's more intuitive to um, uniformity, right? And I understand that American English has become the standard across the globe for the most part, except for like first language anglophonic countries like Canada, but I think most people who learn English learn American English. That's perfect. As an American, I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm glad people do that. But when I'm not constantly, I'm not going to victimize myself like that because it's not constantly. It's very few and far between. I do catch shit for using British English, especially when I actually speak. So when I say trousers, or, I say torch, or I say lift, or I say pad, or ground floor, right? When I say those things, sometimes I get shit, right? And that's totally natural in this environment that I'm assimilated in. My understanding of American English is perfectly fine. It happens more over text. Like, if people assume I spell tire wrong because I use Y, or Like, you know, a lot of medical words like hemochromatosis has an A in the beginning, or diarrhea has the O before the E. Gonorrhea, any rhea there. You know, loan words from Latin. I believe they're loan words from Latin. But, yeah. So, I mean, I do catch shit for that. It's very hard for me. It's like, if I use Spaniard Spanish pronunciation and vocabulary, um, and I caught shit for it, I'd be very disheartened. And same thing, like, um, yeah, no, I really am big on source material. That's why I don't like reading transliterations of Beowulf. Everything is really important. Like, I understand, like, direct translation, they need to do that, but if they're trying to preserve the original text, and they use a W instead of a win, what? That's gross. Like, those little things that don't even get me started on win, because the letter in orthography, like when you copy and paste it, which you have to do because it doesn't exist in you know your the Unicode of your phone, right? You have to copy and paste it. Like, it's always bold, and the same thing goes for Yoch. Like, how, like, it's impossible to be an American, or it's impossible to be an English language enthusiast under these conditions. I don't have a Tyronian, yeah, Tyronian ond, right? I don't have a Tyronian G. I think those are the same. What's the word? Diacritic. I don't think it's like, yeah. I don't have Tyronian notes in my phone. Like, what? Like, I've runes. I have Nordic runes. That's cool, but even those vary. Like, I have to go from Elther Futhark to, later Futhark, and just like trying to find, and even trying to remember them, because a lot of diphthongs we have in English don't exist in, they don't exist as diphthongs, right? Thorn, they have thorn, they have vend, they have, they have the sound. Like, well, we have eng too, so they have ash and ethel, right? But yeah, they have ash and ethel, which is all fine and dandy. But why don't we have ash and ethel? Or we do have ash and ethel. Well, why don't we have why don't we have eng? Like, I'm not seeing a true eng anywhere, right? And I'm real tired of having to type out win to have it substitute. I have it as a substitute on my phone. That's how much I use it, right? So those things just piss me off, right? I'm a huge traditionalist, right? I'm a progressive, and I think ideas should move forward, and I think languages should develop and evolve, but I think things should be preserved as they were written, right? Like, the language is going to change from English, and then the English I speak now is going to be grammatically incorrect for the futures, when English does evolve in the United States, right? The language I speak in my songs, which I'm not going to be able to change when I'm dead, and the languages change. Like, I don't want them to change that. Sure, if they write Wikipedia articles about my music in New English, or the English they use in the future in Anglophonic countries, if they want to translate it to the modern English, feel free, right? Or transliterate it, right? But, like, I don't want to change it. Don't change the source material. Never change my source material. And even the English I do write, the papers I have written with Old English diacritics, I think that's the right word, that I have written with Old English diacritics and things like that, don't change those. Like, yeah, I use Whilch when I write personal things, but eventually I'm going to die and people are going to see those. But if those ever get published, were I to attain some fame of sorts, like, don't change the words I've written, right? You can translate them, you can modernize them, but if you are maintaining the current script, just leave it as is. But yeah, I'm not gonna be some pretender here and tell you I know a whole lot about Old English, Saxon, right? I know some words like Huet, Wegardena, and Yardagum. The opening words to Beowulf. I almost said Beowulf. Oops. See, that's why we need the win, because if I see that W, I'm going to say Beowulf, right? But, yeah, so I just like Old English orthography. I like orthography in general. I think it's interesting. I think Eurocentric. I'm a big Eurocentric. I am not saying that as an insult to outer European cultures. It's just most of my studies and the things I care about are in Europe. So I care about orthography. I care about Hebrew. I almost said Jewish. Hebrew and Jewish are not the same. I think Hebrew and Yiddish, those alphabets and things, those are really cool. You know, I, I do study things like Phoenician and Arabic and Greek and Russian, and, all the various Cyrillic alphabets that have weird letters that don't exist anywhere else, right? Gothic, I know how to read Gothic, right? Do I speak Gothic? Do I sound like someone who speaks Gothic? I'm gonna let you revel for about 10 seconds here. Do I strike you as somebody that speaks Gothic? No, no. And if I did, you're wrong, right? But all that aside, I do like orthography and everything, but yeah, what I'm trying to do on my channel now is I'm not trying to conflate my ego, right? I'm not trying to inflate anything, right? My knowledge is my knowledge, right? And my knowledge is unique to me, but there are people that no one knows the things you know in the order that you know them, and no one knows the things that I know in the order that I know them. But there are people that know things that I know, and more about the things that I like. A specialist would do a million times better the things that I do, right? Um, like a specialist would be able to sit here and tell you what uh, uh, how many years Karl Dunitz got in prison for heading the Nazi party, right, after everything fell apart and at the end there. I don't know that, right? Thank God I don't know that, because I don't need to be accused further of being a National Socialist. I'm not a National Socialist. I fucking hate the Nazi party. But, a specialist would be able to sit here and tell you a lot of Spanish, a Spanish speaker would be able to speak Spanish better than I do, right? A Czech speaker would be able to speak any Czech at all, which I don't. But I know that Czech has that R with the accent on it, right? I know that's how you. And a Polish speaker would be able to speak a lot more Polish than I do. I could probably yeah, whatever, right? And but I can tell you that the difference between Polish and Ruthenian names, like Ukrainian names, they a lot of one of the ways they differentiate the last names is they oftentimes transliterate Ukrainian names with a Y instead of a J at the end. So like Yak, it would be YAK and JAK. YAK in Ukrainian and JAK in Polish, right? Okay, I know that, but I don't speak Ukrainian, right? So the specialists are great, right? Do I know? I mean, do I know? Do I know things about movies? Yeah, but do I know a lot about movies? No, I'm not a film critic. Do I know a lot about or do I know some music? Yeah. Like, do I know what bands I like? Do I know what makes genres? Yeah, but am I a music specialist, music critic? No. So I don't really have the parameters to tell you what's right and wrong, but I like my knowledge, right? I put a heavy emphasis on learning, and I put a heavy emphasis on human intelligence, not my own, but I want humanity to get smarter. I want us to do things. I want us to do cool shit. I want humanity to be hardworking again. I don't see that a lot. I'm not a very hard worker. I work hard on things I like, and ideally I'd be able to do that the rest of my life and get by fine, but working hard on fumbling through a German text doesn't really get you anywhere, right? So I need to contribute to society at some point, which I'll try to, but I don't learn things to try to be smarter than other people or hold it over their heads, but I learn because learning is the quintessential human element. It's what makes us us. I wish other people would do that. And like, there are people that make the shit I like. whether it be literature, arts, music, right? Like, people that make that know how to make shit that speaks to people. And that's a knowledge I'll never have, right? But I can break it down theoretically, right? I can use applied knowledge and, things I've learned. I can break those things down. But I like seeing humanity do cool shit, I like seeing cultures collaborate. I like seeing borders be broken. I don't like seeing culture be destroyed, but I do like cultures opening themselves up and being like, this is what we are. The Irish do it really well. Like, the Celtic culture is going to be pervasive, right? It's always going to exist. And I guess that's where I'm going to leave it. Humanity, we're on a rocky road right now. I wish people would be more collaborative, but, I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a leader of a country, so who am I to say, right? But I'd like to see us do cool shit. I'd like to see us invent something. I'd like to see us change the world. I'd like to see us cure cancer. I'd like to see us cure, a lot of things. I'd like to not be sick. I'd like to be able to go to the doctor and not have cost a lot of money, right? So I'm not puking and, churning butter out of my rectum, right? It's not fun, okay? It's not cool. I'm not a fan of it, right? I don't like having to drink a lot of, 4 or 5 liters of water a day because my body's just excreting water at every orifice. My endocrine system, my gastroenterological system, my renal system, they're producing water, right? And then my pulmonary system, you need water to make blood, right? You need iron, you need oxygen, you need all those things, okay? So, yeah. So that's where I'm going to leave you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me to be self-critical. And, of course, I'm not the only person that commits these sins. The way I commit these sins is probably unique to me. But I'm not out here trying to, usurp the knowledge mantra from people. I'm not trying to put others down. It's just sometimes I get lost in my presumptions, or I get lost in my ways, or I say the wrong thing, or I'm, maybe trying to impress somebody. I don't really do that one much anymore. But I mean, just being self-aware, trying to be a better person, but yeah, just being aware of this. I'll talk more on this in future episodes, but as for now, thank you for listening. I'm Evan. Peace.